It is great to be here and be with all of you in this incredible day as we celebrate the election of Anthony Rendon. And Supervisor, I know you said if you speak Spanish, it's Rendon. Anthony doesn't, so it's Rendon sometimes too. They told me it couldn't be formal, that it had to be a casual event, and that I was supposed to speak about the Speaker as a friend, and unfortunately my friends pay the price. But it is so amazing to have iconic leaders like Hilda Solis with us, to have one of the amazing governors of California, Gray Davis, with us today. Governor, thank you for your amazing career and commitment to California. And to be in this place and talk about a river that needs to exist for all of us, it is so important to be joined by one of the world's great architects, designers, and thinkers, Frank Gehry. Thank you for all you've done and the vision you have for our collective future. Now, Herb will tell you, when we watch the swearing in of a new speaker, we hearken back to our own swearings in. And I'm thinking back to my time 6 years ago being sworn in, and so many of the same people here, and so many of the same issues that we're dealing with. But we find ourselves in fundamentally a better place because of the collective work of not just the elected officials, but the activists and advocates who are with us today, who've transformed California in those last 6 years. And it really provides us an opportunity to look at what the next 8 years under the leadership of Speaker Rendon can look like. 6 years ago, California was mired in tens of billions of dollars of deficit, and today we find ourselves with multi-billion-dollar reserves. 6 years ago, I had to deal with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Speaker Rendon, thankfully, you get to deal with Jerry Brown. And as the supervisor said, 6 years ago, we were all dealing with the reality of polluting companies like Exide, something that brought so many of us together to fight for good environmental justice legislation and reforms, and there's much work to be done, and that's why it's so important that we have a legislative leader in Speaker Rendon who has such an amazing career as an environmental activist. A lot has changed, and I also thought back when Speaker Rendon was sworn in the Capitol, he reminded me of my swearing in, and to hear him tell it, he said I seated him way in the back of the gallery of the chambers. I want to remind him that the gallery is where the First Lady sits during the State of the State. And if we're all lucky and Annie gets elected governor, you'll be able to sit there one day yourself. Now, I say that with love because they afforded me the opportunity to perform their wedding. It brings me to the purpose of today and my comments. I was told that I'm not supposed to speak about Speaker Rendon as speaker, as a peer. I'm not supposed to dive into policy or get into discussions of challenges facing California, although before you come to the next Regents meeting, we do have a lot to catch up on. I'm not supposed to talk about policy or politics, or even Anthony Rendon as speaker. I'm supposed to talk about my friend Anthony. We have an incredible friendship because he is such an incredible person that I think so many of us have that relationship with him. You heard Frank Gehry talk about his humility. You heard Hilda and the others talk about his strength. He's the guy who, when I was speaker and things were going rough, I could call and we could go have coffee. I didn't used to go to the brewery that you did, Mr. Mayor, although there is a new one, Angel City, that we invite you to. We would just go and we would talk, and I would complain about some of the members of the assembly, and Anthony would hear me out. And it's amazing that after hearing some of those stories, he still wanted to be speaker, but he did. And we have a tradition where every Christmas Eve we get together for breakfast. We go have tamales and buy some and take them to our respective families. He is an incredible friend, but also an amazing champion and an incredibly deep thinker. The senator talked about his .86 GPA in high school. 0.83? So you overinflated his grades. But what is amazing is that he reflected on his life and opportunity, and the opportunities that we hope to afford to everybody, and went back to school and ultimately got his PhD from UC Riverside in political philosophy. And that actually brings me to a little discussion I want to have. It naturally, his role in studying political philosophy makes me think of Roman Emperor Justinian. For those of you who don't know, part of having the title Speaker Emeritus requires me invoking ancient Rome once or twice a year. Otherwise, I lose the Latin privileges in the title. Now, Justinian is not a figure often invoked on the floor of the legislature. Brian Mainshine will tell you our Republican colleagues instead refer to Ronald Reagan. But Mr. Speaker, we can fix that. Justinian, and this is really important for us to reflect on based on where we are today. Justinian was the emperor who codified the entire body of Roman law. He revised and restructured it. He brought a logic and a consistency to Roman law that outlived the empire by centuries, in fact, by millennia. But to describe what he did as just editing and compiling doesn't begin to articulate the magnitude of his contributions to our world societies. He articulated a body of rights that would find its way into the Magna Carta and form the basis for English common law. Our laws today, in many ways, are governed by that which he wrote. The rights we enjoy today, the words of our Constitution, and the broader enlightened ideals woven throughout that document, our very notion of our natural rights, all of it founded on the basis of ideals put forward by Justinian 15 centuries ago. Now, there's one concept in particular that he advanced that I want to take a moment to reflect on, and that is the concept of public trust and the Justinian public trust doctrine. His thought process, as you might imagine, lost to history. But we can imagine that he started down this path by asking certain basic questions. Who owns the shoreline? Does anyone have title to the air we breathe? How much of a river can be diverted for a farmer, for a miller, for their purposes? We can imagine that he asked these questions as a bit of reductionism because they are all answered by his doctrine of public trust. That things like the shore and the sea and the rivers, and even the very breath in our lungs are valued and valuable to all, and must be held in trust by government for common good. Today that concept is real and vivid, only the terminology is different. We use terms like natural areas and undeveloped lands. We think of terms of renewable resources. The water that we drink is a renewable resource. The air that we breathe, the children that we raise are such as well. And most importantly of all, and I can't overstate how important this is, given what's happening in the presidential race that we're watching unfold, our democracy must be treated as a renewable resource too. Now I want you to consider something. There is more than a little bit of symbolism in Speaker Rendon's choice of this as our venue today. 3 generations ago, it was considered a triumph of progress that we'd encase a river in concrete. The people of our communities beamed with pride at the ingenuity of encasing our river in concrete. But today, when it comes to the river, we define triumph in terms of renewal. And we define pride as the feeling we share when we envision the day when this river flows naturally and freely like it did for thousands of generations before us. We're eager to see the plans of the visionary Frank Gehry. We're eagerly anticipating the day when we're going to see a river that means sitting on the grass behind shaded trees and serenaded by birds. The renewal of a Los Angeles river that doesn't end at the city limits of Los Angeles is a triumph of public rights and a triumph of public good. Mr. Gehry, Speaker Rendon, and all of us together know that restoring this river also restores our public spirit. California has been through hard times in recent years, as hard as the concrete walls that encase this river. The California dream that once seemed distant as the ancient concepts that we've discussed and the river before us. But the California dream is too being restored. Times are returning to their natural tenor. something that was vividly on display when the Speaker was inaugurated and talked about opportunity for all of us. This is a moment of renewal for our state. It is, in fact, represented in Speaker Rendon's leadership, his honesty and his integrity, his intelligence and savvy. These were easy explainers to illustrate very clearly why his colleagues chose him to lead the Assembly as Speaker. They asked him to serve because the causes he fought for and was an advocate of for renewable resources, including the renewable resource that's most vital of all, our children, and his work as a champion for early childhood development. They asked him to serve because of the collective effort he led to put a genuine water bond on the ballot, his patient, steady, thoughtful leadership that produced the water bond that we needed, one that was passed by the voters and is already transforming the lives of communities throughout the state for the better. And they asked him to serve because they collectively bear a trust and a responsibility to serve the public as well, led by an incredibly consistent, dedicated Speaker.